You know, depending upon how your company performs, it may not be the systems, it may not be the industry you're in. It could be your workplace, Dennis.
Yeah, and that workplace is not just the physical environment, it's the people in the environment that create the challenges that we face.
Yeah. It's funny. The things that we were taught when we were really young in terms of how we should act, more along the lines when we get a little bit older, I don't know. I think we kind of push them to the side. We forget about them. And that really goes to the topic that we have today about the workplaces. Today, we are lucky to have Tommie Jo Brode, who is the founder of Venice Solution Systems, but also the author of a book called Authentic Workplaces. I think this is really interesting, Dennis, in the fact being able to understand what that looks like and what that means. This is a topic that I hadn't really thought much about, but in terms of how she explains what an authentic workplace is, I think this is really a good one.
It is, and I mean, and I actually read the book, and so the book it's fun reading, and I have to say, I'm one that I like summaries, and she summarizes the end of each chapter in a format that allows you to quickly articulate and understand what she was talking about in the chapter, and then you can go back and read the chapters later, which I did. And so, um, it's common sense stuff that we all know, but we all don't do it, is the sad part.
Let's have a listen to this one. I think this is something you're going to walk away, maybe think a little bit about your environment.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
Over the years, Dennis, I had I don't know if I'll say privilege of working in multiple different corporate environments. And some of the environments I really liked. It felt good. It wasn't a chore really to kind of work with some of those people over that worked there. And there's one company I can think of in particular. And for anyone who knows me, they know who I'm talking about. It was a toxic wasteland to go to. I remember driving it was in Tennessee, driving to my workplace. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what is this going to be like today?
So it wasn't work, it was actual torture daycare that you had to go to, basically.
I think I just wanted to get to my office, shut the door and just do my work and then leave. But that's not the healthiest way to live. It's not the healthiest place to be. And for those of us who really aren't familiar with those type of workspaces, maybe, you should take a look at the workspace that you're running today. I don't know. Dennis,
Yeah.
this is a confusing topic for me.
Yeah, and I mean, this applies to big companies as well as small companies because
Mhm.
there's people involved and people have emotions, people have feelings, people don't communicate well. Some do, some don't. And so there's always a chance for conflict or misunderstandings that don't really have to happen.
But you know what, Dennis? We have an expert today who's going to shed some light on this whole problem we have. Tommie, thank you for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. It's obvious. I kind of played up a little bit with the people in some of the workspaces, but I have worked in some really not healthy work environments before, and I've worked in some really great ones. Can you talk a little bit about what a workplace should be or what we should strive to look at? What are some things that we should be aware of, I guess, when we think about our workplace and what we're designing?
Sure. Well, before we get to an elaborate checklist or theory of any kind, let's set the bar at least at a minimum. People should not dread going there. It shouldn't be
Great.
terrible, right?
Right.
And that sounds like such a baseline, and yet I see so many workplaces that just can't even hit that minimum bar. And yes, there's a lot of thought and books and stuff on this. Ask yourself as a manager or owner, have you worked somewhere that sucked? I know that's a crass way to say it, but it's
Mhm.
right. Okay. And what did that mean and why? This stuff is not that complicated. We know it, but we are not doing it. So are you micromanaging people? Do people feel seen and heard? Notice I didn't say, do they get a parade every day? Every day is employee appreciation. No, you can take any good idea too far. But are we doing basic courteous things? And so often the answer is no. So I think that's a really important start. And probably 25% of the workplaces out there, they can pause and listen to the rest of this podcast later because they're not even doing that. So start there and then come on back, remember where you left off and listen to the rest of this conversation. It's really baseline stuff, but a lot of places don't do it.
No, and why do you think that? I mean, from your experience and studies, why do managers not do some of the basics?
I think there's a handful that are just, crotchety, difficult people. I think most of them either don't know what they are allowed to say or ask or do, or they're afraid. We do live in a pretty litigious society, and nobody wants to be a viral video of bad managerness. Nobody wants the organization to be part of a lawsuit and they're the one that goofed up. Nobody wants to lose their job. So the things that make the news oftentimes, more often than I wish, are those kinds of things. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be, quote, in trouble as an owner or a manager. So it's sort of this culture of fear that we can't even check in on people. We can't even ask, are you okay? Hey, what's going on? Hey, how can I help? For absolute fear that that will be taken badly or somebody will run with it the wrong direction. And the truth is, most of the time people do want to be checked on, but we
Well,
don't do it.
I know I've been high level, I've been mid managers and that kind of thing. As a mid manager, you're really stuck in between because you got the employees that you're working with. You've also got a boss ahead of you that sometimes is really good. And if you have a good one there, it trickles down all the way. But if you have a bad boss that is just numbers driven, doesn't care about the people, it seems like it kind of cascades down to the others. And I think as a manager, that's where you kind of you got to ask yourself, hey, how can I take care of the people that work for me? But how do you can't change the person ahead of you because they're already there, but be aware of that. And sometimes maybe it's time to move on. I mean, that's why I left some companies at times because I knew the person ahead of me was never going anywhere and they created the negative culture. And so I wasn't going to solve the problem below me, and which is a challenge.
Agreed. I mean, sometimes it is just time to move on. If the organization's big enough, maybe there's somewhere different that you can be other than around that manager. If it seems like the organization is worth it, because I mean, don't get me wrong, I've left several atmospheres
Hmm.
for exactly that reason. But sometimes when you have a person who is very numbers driven, everybody wants to talk about key performance indicators. Tell me about your KPIs. Hey, I'm not against KPIs, but what I would say to the crowd of people that are so hyper focused on that is, okay, if we lose all of our humans, what do you think will happen to the KPIs? We need HUMANs to make the KPIs work, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these managers that are driven by that type of data, or at least present that way, they might just not be socially intuitive. They might not be emotionally intelligent. They might be a math whiz, but they don't have great people skills. So that's, is that person worth teaching? And we can actually be a teacher and a helper, even if someone is our boss. So maybe maybe not with the same sarcasm that I came across spelling out human. Can't say that I suggest that. It's, a little bit risky, but maybe you could say to them, hey, look, I'm doing my best with these. Here's the barrier I have. You want whatever, make up an example. You want everybody to come at 6 a.m., not 7 a.m. Okay, I understand the production part of that. This many of them have children. This many have advanced age parents or whatever it is. This is their very real barrier. They are not going to do this, or they're not going to do it every day, and present the human case to the person, because it does impact your numbers. I mean, it absolutely does. If you have a type of business that needs people to work at it, we're going to have to work with people and sometimes meet them where they are, so that when we have a big ask as an owner or a manager, they have some incentive to give back. People don't just give and give and give. That makes them quit and quit and quit. So it's got to be give and take, I think.
The other thing, as I read your book and stuff, as the manager, it's also you hit KPIs, but having some metrics that you watch for, because there's some that you're all numbers managers, but it's like, okay, if you're having lots of turnover or certain things happen, those are indicators that there's probably something wrong. It's either could be your style, it could be lack of direction, lack of communication, all kinds of different variables. But there's different things in one of those chapters that you shared, Tommie, that I just thought was kind of eye opener, that a lot of them just chalk it up to, oh, it's the industry or it's, this stuff. You might need to look a little deeper. It could be the fact you're not leading really well.
I think that's hard for all of us to admit. Nobody sort of wakes up in the morning going, okay, let's see what's wrong with me and my management style today. That's not an intuitive thing to do. But we do need to do that because those things cost money. Bad culture costs real money, right? Part of it might be, hey, how am I performing as a manager? How's our whole team doing? How's our leadership team doing? If we have, 20% turnover, what does that mean in terms of dollars, productivity, lost knowledge? We have to really take a hard look sometimes at our indicators at all, key performance or otherwise. How are we really doing? And that's tricky to do because it's really opening ourselves up to, I could be part of the problem here. It's always easier to say, Dennis is the problem. Oh,
Right.
if Benny only wouldn't do that, then we'd be thriving.
Right.
What about me?
Yeah.
We got to do that.
And
It seemed a little
Benny, you think about, we had Ed Hinkle on. Gosh, I think it's been like 3 years ago, where that one book, the Miracle Manager, I forget what it was, but it was a cleaning service that had like, I don't know, like 200% turnover. I mean, it was like really high. And they brought in a new manager. And the thing the manager did was to sit down and understand what was important to each of the individual employees. And many of these, because they were probably entry-level workers, it was like, I would like to own a car, or someday I'd like to own a house. And then they put plans together with those people on how to save $20 a week so they could get a down payment on a house. And their turnover rate went from like 200% to, 10% in a year. And it's like, it
wow.
was they didn't change anything other than they sat down and listened to their employees of what was their personal need, not their work need, but what was their personal need. And all of a sudden, people wanted to work there. They didn't hate to come there. They were actually telling their friends, this is a great place to work. People actually help me get a house, help me get a car, help me, get my kids' education, whatever it was that they were trying to get to. You don't hear that a lot from managers, but it's like in a small business, you really have a competitive advantage over big companies because you're right there. Just step back and have a meeting with people and then be quiet and listen and get them to articulate what they want. This is not hard stuff, but it is hard stuff.
Well, I mean, Tommie, seems to me that we learned all this stuff in kindergarten. I mean, Mrs. Brown, who was my kindergarten teacher, and I remember things like no shouting, be kind, share your things. It's almost like, okay, we're going to start a company. By the way, let me give you this kindergarten lesson all over again. I don't know. Am I wrong? Am I oversimplifying things?
You are not. You are spot on. And let me go on and validate you here. I mean, I've sat in depositions that are very expensive to clients, by the way, and those are the things that come out. It's not the underlying problem. I mean, that was a hiccup to be sure, but it's things like I got hurt at work. I worked there for 11 years and nobody checked on me. Or a discrimination lawsuit. Every day I just wanted to go to lunch with everybody else and nobody asked me. Now we're back to kindergarten. If somebody wants to sit at your table, yeah, go ahead and let them. It's like 101 ways to not be a total jerk at work, but we're not killing it as a society. We're just not. And I don't say that to be flippant. It's just, it really is this easy and we really are not doing it.
No, I mean, it's basic 101 how you want to be treated and how you treat others, but we don't do it. I mean, that's
That's
the
right.
sad part. That's the sad part. And then it turns into lawsuits that you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, tons of hours, wasted on getting all this information together. And you may win as the company in the lawsuit, but the employee lost. And trust me, that employee tells everybody else and they all know it. And so it becomes a cancer inside the organization. And
Well,
so no one really won.
that's exactly right. I think there's a lot of places in life that we can win and lose. In litigation for a business and in divorce court, I want to suggest to everybody that's listening to this, there are no winners. I've done this for a very long time. Turnover, a bad reputation, and you're out $48,000 because you quote won. I don't know about where you come from, but where I come from, that is not a win. There's no winning. So we really have to just be more practical. And one of the things that I remind myself first, and then clients and colleagues, is yes, there are bad, toxic employees. Of course, there's bad, toxic people. So therefore employees. But it's not most. Most employees are not awful. Most employees are not out to get us. Most employees actually just want to support their family and then go home. And so we get jaded, including myself. And we get jaded because the onesies, twosies that behave so badly and everybody else gets punished. So then we turn our workplace into this like bad middle school group project, where everybody gets the punishment and most of them are just perfectly fine people who are trying to do their job, and we need to support them in that. And by the way, tell them what we want them to do. There's a little fun tip. Employees perform a lot better when you tell them what you want them to do. You can't believe how many clients I have. They're just mystified. And I say, well, did you tell them to do this? What do you mean? Did I stutter? What does your handbook say? And did you tell them
Yeah.
you wanted them to do the job this way?
I've heard of companies that want to grow, but then they don't bother to have goals or explain to people what the targets are for the quarter or the month or the year. And then someone asks the question, and it's like it's silence, or it's like, well, don't you know the goal? The goal is to make a lot of money. That's too broad. You've got to be more
That's right.
specific of what do you need that particular individual to do
Right.
to help you get to be successful. And I love companies that say, oh, we'll let the employee decide. Well, you still have to give direction. You've got to provide the vision for them and clarity, and then allow them to fill in. But you've got to communicate with them. You can't just say, here's this and go figure it out, because you end
Yeah.
up with lawsuits or people quitting and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely agree. If you want to count money, go work at a bank. But if you want to be a leader, lead, which means you tell people, here's the big mission. Here's your piece of it. And specifically, and this is the part that so many employers miss, here's how I want you to get there. I want you to process 42 pieces of paper today. I want you to manufacture 16 widgets today, whatever it is, at a very granular level. And then if you have a question, here's where I want your question to go. Because if we don't tell them, if there's an information gap, they will fill that gap. They'll do it as best they can, but it probably won't be the way we want. Well, I'll ask so-and-so. He's been here for 4 years. Well, he might be clueless. Well, I don't know that, and you didn't tell me where to go, and I don't want you to think I'm dumb, so I'll ask him.
And then as a manager, when that employee makes 16 widgets consistently, great, but then they have a week of 20, praise them. Let them know, hey, I noticed that you did more than, and then watch. And if they go down, hey, are you okay? Is there something that, is there something wrong with the equipment? Is there something that I can help you with? Because normally you do 16 and this week you only did 12. I mean, that's a good manager. You're not sitting there saying, oh, you got to get 16, you screwed up. You're asking them what's wrong, and they'll tell you what's wrong if you ask.
They will. You got to ask, and then you got to listen, and then just be honest with people about what you can and can't do. Certainly, as leaders, employees will ask lots of things of us that we can't deliver or we can't change. We have to just be honest about that. And if you say, well, let me check and get back to you, newsflash, check, then get back to them. Even if the answer is no, maybe it's no, but I can do this, or I can work with you on your break here. It's even something small. I don't think most people expect the moon, but they do expect to be heard, and they do expect us to care about them as a human being first.
Well, the one right now, I mean, think about it, COVID hit. We all went home, and we were, and our podcast is WFH with two guys. So we're talking about working from home.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got companies saying, oh, 100% have to come back. To me, that's just insane. It's like, okay, on a previous podcast I mentioned, it's because they've got brick and mortar and they got to justify filling that building with bodies. It's not because they're going to be more productive to have them all in. They're really poor managers, and they think the way to manage is butts and seats.
Mm-hmm.
This is one as a manager and a company, especially if you're small, to me that hybrid model is the best one. What a great solution. You maybe don't need as big a building as you grow. You allow people to work from home some, you got to have metrics. You got to set the standards of what you expect to be delivered. And as long as the outcome comes, who cares where they do it at, if it can be productive for them and the employee. So that's one I still challenge back. I don't agree with Elon Musk and those guys that making everybody show back up in the building is going to be the most productive use of time, effort, and it also creates pollution because they got to drive to work, and this way they can stay home and be successful.
Totally agree. Preaching to the choir on that one. There's no question, can people work from home? I mean, but for COVID, maybe we could have that conversation. That's nonsensical post-COVID. So if that's what people want, and enhances their life or their day, I think it comes from a generational thing. So I'm a Gen Xer, and there's this big notion that we need to let it go. But the notion goes something like this, well, when I was 27, I showed up early and I was there before my boss.
That's not
I
inspirational.
could care
Now,
less.
yay
Exactly.
you, so
Yeah.
so what? I stayed after
Why?
my boss.
Why?
And you
Why
know
were you
what?
that Why were you that
Yeah.
stupid and showed up
We
early?
never, yeah.
Exactly. But they get really stuck on that. And it's
Yeah.
like this notion of here, this was my path, and therefore everybody else's path must look like mine. This antiquated notion of putting your time in. I think there's a time and place. It's called experience and meaningful contributions. But it's not about I've been alive this number of years and therefore I'm superior. And I
Yeah.
think older generations, including mine, need to let that go and just get over it because it's
That,
just counterproductive.
that's,
Again, in your book, in your book, you talk about work-life balance. And I mean, I think,
yeah.
again, as an employer, if you can help your employees find that work-life balance, they're going to want to work there because nobody wants to work 100% of the time, 24/7. They've got to have a balance of what they do, and they've got to feel productive at work, but also have that quality of life with their family and people outside of work.
Absolutely. Let me give you a quick example of that. So this has been a few years back. It was before COVID. So I had a job interview with a new team member on my team. And to make a long story short, we got into, the former job and why did you leave? And the short version was, well, my boss was a jerk when I needed to take my kids to the doctor. And I finally said, we're interviewing for a full-time job. I said, do you want to work full time? And her answer was, well, I'm willing to because I want a professional job that uses my degree and they're all full time. So being someone who can magically think out of the box, because that's not that complicated, I said, so what if this job were less than full time, but it's still all the other stuff? Oh my gosh, that'd be my dream job. Great. How many hours do you want to work? She thought about it and gave me an answer. And we just changed the position. She was and still is, she still works there. One of the most, she's capable, she's intelligent, she's articulate, and fiercely loyal. And what did we have to do? Give her less hours than everybody else because somebody created a form that said it ought to be 40. That's crazy.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
works for her. She had 3 very young children, including twins. She's killing it. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all the things that we all know from first grade, Benny, but we all don't do it as
We're
we
not doing it. That's
get
it.
older and crazier.
Well, one of the things that I did want to ask too as well, and I thought this was a worthwhile topic to get into, it was from a leadership perspective and being able to, I've seen this before work so well, being able to be human, admit that I as a leader make mistakes, that I, fail, and to bracket up like decisions, maybe they're tough decisions and why I had to make them and do that type of thing. Can you talk to that, Tommie? And how does that kind of work within the workplace?
Sure. Well, I think authenticity really starts and stops with us individually, right? And I talk a lot about authentic workplaces, but that really means people who show up in an authentically human way. And none of us are perfect. So what does it look like to really own that? I think that means saying out loud, not sort of buried in the middle of an email like some bad game. It means saying out loud when we get it wrong. Hey, you know what? We were talking about that yesterday. And although I still disagree with you, I was probably a little snappy and I'm sorry. Or I didn't get this to you in time and I should have. I just want you to know that's partially my fault that that's late. Whatever it is, we have to say it out loud and we have to mean it. And that really is a tall order because I don't know about the two of you, but I don't love it when people point out my mistakes. Now we're saying point out your own. Yes, we are. Because it does many things that are good, but you also create a team where they know it's safe to bring you their mistakes. One of the big things about leading, if you have a team that's not going to tell you about the bad stuff, you don't tell me you got a compliment. I can live with that. But if something really went sideways and I hear about it from above me, that is not cool. The only way to create a team that is that loyal and that can be that honest and authentic is to say, well, you know what? Tommie does that. She tells us when she messes up, I got to tell her when I do. And I think that is just the best thing we can do. Just own it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, I mentioned the book that Tommie wrote, so it's called Authentic Workplaces. And there was one chapter I really liked, Tommie. It's chapter 9, Baby Steps to Culture Changes. And I loved it, the fact, one, at the back of all your chapters, you kind of do a quick bullet point outline of what's in the chapter. And I'm one of the ones that I don't ever read the whole book. I just summarize. So you summarized each chapter. I loved it. So this one was just very logical kind of things that you could do. So, I mean, you want to kind of elaborate. So if I'm a manager out here, what can I do to make the changes?
Sure. I think it's hard to know where to start. People are listening to us today and they think, okay, but how do I do that? There's big gap between what y'all are describing and what I'm living. Just do something. Just start. Maybe it is you're not connected enough to your team. So you're going to, put on the calendar some one-on-one connection time, or you're going to put on the calendar office hours so people can walk in. Just commit and start. You're not a tree, okay? So you're not stuck wherever you are now or wherever you are next week. You can always pivot, but just try it. Don't overthink it. You've known people your whole life, so you can do this. Take baby steps and start something. And then 3 weeks from now, do another little thing. And then you'll blink, and in a year, you really will have a better culture.
And again, make it real. I mean, don't do something that, because the employees will know if it's fake. So
Oh, yeah.
you've got to be sincere. You've got to be, if you're going to do office time, it's free open office time, and you're not sitting there on your phone. Put your damn phone down when they come in and talk to you. I mean,
Exactly.
there's
That's
some
right.
basics that you need to kind of think about. And we all take that for granted because many of us are married to our cell phone. So
Mhm.
put the damn thing down when you have one-on-ones with employees and also with your kids and family. Put it away for a little while. It's okay.
That's right. And I think the question to ask yourself before you decide what is your first baby step is, if you're doing this and it's performative, right? You're saying, I think they'll like this. This will look good on a report. Don't even bother, because you're going to make it worse. The question is, what tiny little thing that is real can you give? Something that you're putting on the table in terms of a human interaction with your teams. I'd rather see you do that, however small, than something that's fake, because that'll just make it worse. And like, don't look now, but if people don't like you, they'll dislike you more. That's a very real human emotion that escapes some managers and leaders. So
Uh,
yeah, baby steps, but real ones.
Tommie, there's so much here that we haven't even touched on. And I know that Dennis was talking to me about the book and how he really enjoyed some of your insight, but there are going to be some people who want to talk to you and maybe get a little bit more information. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Sure. I have a website that's just my name that has sort of all my professional stuff. That's TommieJoBrode.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest ways to find me.
Reach out to Tommie. I'm sure she'll be able to give you some insight and some thoughts that you hadn't thought about before. But Tommie, thank you so much for stopping by today. We really appreciate it. I definitely learned a lot.
Happy to be here and nice talking with you both.
Thank you. And you guys
Thank
listen
you.
in. This is a great one.